presenting. All right, and I have to say that we are coming to our last speaker for the day after being here for almost, how many? 4 full hours. I hope everybody's excited. We have Ana Triculescu joining us from Panama and from Panama TESOL. So the presentation that Ana is going to be talking about is setting expectations through the well-being lens. A little bit about Ana. Ana received her master's degree in TESOL from College of Notre Dame of Maryland in 2009. She began her professional career more than 15 years ago. For the past 8 years, Ana directed national and regional educational development and humanitarian programs in various NGOs, both local and international. Currently, she's also an active faculty at Quality Leadership University in Panama. So her session is going to review the concepts of well-being and self-care in terms of the human dimensions and match the terms with our professional lives. In this lens, we're going to look at what actions we can develop to better care for ourselves and understand how we should set expectations during these dire times. We will analyze together what priorities we established for ourselves, mainly professional, and how they have impacted our overall well-being. Right? So Ana, welcome and take it away.
Thanks so much, George. Hi, everyone, and thank you for sticking on to this. As George said, well, it's been 4 hours now, so hopefully you're not going to doze off during my intervention. And I hope for those of us that are on the Central American or Eastern time, hunger does not creep in too badly right now as is lunchtime, right? So I promise to try and make it a little less maybe formal than George presented the session. A little more of I'm trying to, or I'll be trying during the session to kind of pass the ball on to you for reflection and so on. So hopefully time will go by rather fast. And also, it would be great if you would have any kind of like input for the presentation and if we could interact as much as Zoom permits it, right? So let me just set up here so I could have maybe some cameras on screen that I can see. Okay, great. So can you guys see my screen, and is the audio okay? Okay, Anastasia, thank you for the thumb up. Okay, so as George mentioned, I am currently more on a humanitarian development setting more than teaching. So this presentation or this session, it won't be as much focused on us as teachers, but more on us as humans, because bottom line, that's where it all starts, right? And then we grow into being teachers or other professions, but we all start as human beings, right? So that's going to be a little bit of the focus of this session, right? But as any good teacher, I will start with a pop quiz. And this is the COVID edition. And what can I say? You know, karma comes and bites us. We're teachers, we do this pretty much all the time. So now you're gonna have to deal with it. This would have been a great way of interacting if we would have been in person, but for now it's just more of a self-reflection type of exercise. So I have just a couple of questions on the screen, and each one of them can be responded with one answer that you see on the right hand side of your screen from that list. So I will give you maybe about a minute and a half to look over the questions and kind of choose which answer you would assign to each one of them. We'll circle back to these questions throughout the session. So yeah, take about a minute and a half. It's a pop quiz after all. It's not too much time that you have. And what I would like you to do is keep in mind those question or that question that kind of rang a bell for you at this point, in terms of have you done this and that or that, and to what extent during the pandemic. So since March, April, that all of this started. Um, yeah. So, what exactly have you done during the pandemic? And now, again, as a self reflection, be honest about it. I'm sure that you definitely try to stay safe and you all upped your personal hygiene routine and your home cleaning skills, right? And we brush a little more and we froth a little more, and there's a little bit more bubbles coming out when we wash our hands, and that's perfectly fine. Um, I think we all had, and not just for teachers, but professions in generally, we had to upgrade our professional skills, right? We had to do capacity training, we had to learn new things, we had to become more digital literate, a little more computer savvy, and so on. What else have you done? What else have you done during the pandemic so far? What changes were you forced into sort of thinking about it? Um, have you stayed connected during the pandemic? um, Definitely home has become our new setting so far, right? Have you canceled your plans, professional or personal, right? um, have you taken care of yourself more or less during all of this time? And taking care of yourself, well, it's a very personal and subjective um, issue. So then you could choose whatever that means to you, right? Cancel all travel plans. Oh, yeah, that and much more, right? More professional developing, more of uh, connected. Okay, more professional development, and that is in capital letters. So I guess that's a big thing that took up a huge chunk of our time during the time thus far, right? More presentation, more webinars, and again, emphasis on from home, right? So now, who are we? And how do we describe ourselves, especially from the answers that we got on our last slide, right? We can describe ourselves as mom, dads, grandparents, depending on the family situation, right? We can describe ourselves as neighbors, friends, partners. We can describe ourselves as professional teachers, learners. During this time, cooks, nurses, um, home cleaners, a bunch of other labels that we were forced to place on ourselves. And that there was no way around it, right? But I think that the bottom line, no matter what the label would be, uh, unemployed teachers, true. Um, Whatever the label is, the external label is, bottom down, we're all human beings, right? And that means that we come with just an incorporated set of similar needs like food, shelter, safety, emotional support, love, and so on. If you take a look at and you go back to the Maslow pyramid, you pretty much you can identify those human needs that are just so characteristic to all of us, right? um so then, and I'm sure that there are a bunch of other theories out there, but this is one that I came in touch with through a Red Cross training, and I truly liked it because it just simplifies things, right? It talks about the human beings having 5 different dimensions, and those are the dimensions that we all have to one extent or another, and to which we all give at some point, some in time, depending on the context and the setting, specific meanings and specific priorities, right, to one dimension over the other. So we have the physical dimension where obviously, well, health and food needs go in. Then we have the emotional dimension that has to do with the healthy boundaries that we place in our professional and our personal life as well, romantic relationships and everything that where emotions are being involved, right? Then we have the mental, the intellectual dimension, and that has to do with our learning and our training and our intellectual development. And this is the big capital letters that I think George chatted a couple of moments ago with more PD, right? Then we also have our social dimension, which has to do with support networks and with friendships and with the people in our lives. And then the spiritual one, and in that case, you can call it God, you can call it the universe, you can call it Gaia, Godin, energy, whatever you want to, whatever name you want to give to it. The idea is that as human beings, we do need something bigger than us to relate to, and that is a very personal choice on what exactly you choose that bigger thing or entity or whatnot to be to you, depending on your cultural and religious and spiritual beliefs, right? um, so this is important because this is linked directly to what is self-care in this case, right? And basically self-care in, and we've talked about this through the entire day today, but down to the very basics is just caring for each one of those human dimensions. And how you do it is going to be very personal, very subjective, very up to you. And I think it was Tammy that mentioned bubble baths and eucalyptus being involved, and that is amazing. But just as an example of um, how subjective this is, I have a friend who absolutely just hates bubble baths. I mean, I cannot describe to you the kind of discussions we got into trying to rationalize to her why bubble baths are just so awesome, and she's just in denial of it, right? Just as in my case, for example, going to the beauty salon, it's not a relaxing thing, and I have girlfriends who just go to the salon to get massages and nails done and all that. And it's just, to me, that it's not a thing. It stresses me out more, right? So it's just some examples of how those self-care activities or actions are truly personal to each individual, to each human being, depending on their needs and depending on their likes, dislikes, and so on. Now, um, the thing with self-care is that excuse me, many times um, we tend to stop at the most kind of like the most superficial levels, right? We think of self-care and we think about, well, I got to exercise and I got to eat well and I got to watch my weight and my health needs to be, appropriate or adequate, let's say. But we need, and especially during these times, to go a step forward and to be able to tap into those dimensions that are a little more tricky to identify, a little more tricky to put a finger on and say, this is what I'm missing, or this is what's causing me distress, or what's driving me towards burnout, maybe, right? So, and again, Tammy mentioned it in her first intervention, uh, putting boundaries, saying no, knowing when to go head first into something, or deciding that this is not the moment for it, right? Those healthy boundaries truly allow us to take care of ourselves, and more so during these times, right? um, Also in terms of connection to that spirituality that I was talking about, like how many of us during lockdown measures, and I'm not sure around other parts of the world, but I can tell you in Panama it's been pretty rough and pretty strict, and still we are facing some restrictive measures taken by the government. We were in lockdown with alternative days to be able to go outside for men and women. and with specific times being set according to your ID number. So it was stressful. You had 2.5 hours to be able to go and do a whole grocery run. And everything else was pretty much closed, right? So in terms of spirituality, for those who were truly accustomed to going to church every Sunday, to be able to reunite with their community at church, to be able to spend that Sunday morning with the people they loved and the support networks, that was taken away completely because churches were closed. There was no agglomerations, there were no crowding, there was nothing of that allowed, right? So during this time when that is taken away from you by an external factor, how do you keep on practicing your spirituality? Because it's part of who you are, right? So those are the little nuances into self-care that we need to pay attention to as well, because sometimes we leave them behind. As long as I exercise 20 minutes a day, I eat a healthy diet, well, I'm good. Well, no, something was taken away from you, and there's sort of a mourning period or a mourning process that you need to deal with, because all these liberties and all these freedoms were eliminated basically from night to morning, right? Excuse me. Also, now talking about self-care, and Beatrix kind of beat me to it because I was talking about the self-care cake as well, and she did her pie chart with the different categories and all that. So she beat me to it, but this is a little bit of a more practical exercise. And in this case, I want you to take a look at those 4 categories that I have on screen, and think of a cake, and think of cutting the cake and giving the specific portion of your slice to each one of those categories, right? So you have chores and housework, caring for others. It could be elderly, it could be children at home, it could be whatever that means for you. Then work and professional development, that's a big one, right? And then me time. And in me time comes everything that has to do with you, but also something that I haven't really heard during the day: rest, sleep. That goes into the me time chunk as well. So what I would like you to do is just take it's 30 seconds really exercise for you to draw up your self-care cake and assign proportions to each one of those slices. And I'm going to show you my example. If you can see it, this is me. And this is my cake. And I am not ashamed to say it, more than half of my time goes into work and professional development. And I'm sure I've been more than generous with the other slices. If I would take this to the mathematical percentages, I'm sure that the other slices would be much thinner, especially the ones that has to do with chores and the me time, which again includes rests. Sorry. So 30 seconds and draw your cake. Would anyone be brave enough to share us their cake? I only truly see, well, from what I'm able to see, Catherine and Glenda on screen right now. So anyone brave enough with their cakes, or you're not even gonna go there or try?
I can share.
Sure, go ahead, Lynn.
So I guess not surprisingly, I think work and professional development accounts for the biggest section of the cake. Since usually these days we don't go to work, so I get up at 7 and I may already start working. And then usually I finish at 6 and my baby goes to the daycare and she comes home at 6. And then housework and house chores and taking care of her. I'm very bad at housework, so I'm not doing so much of it. My house is very messy. So caring for others, since I have a toddler, takes time as well. She's sleeping now, so that's good. Me time, I think I still have good sleep, so that's, I think, is a good thing. And I have learned that sleeping is one of the most important things for our well-being. But I have been guilty for a long time that I don't exercise, I don't eat well, I don't meditate, I don't go for a walk often enough. So yeah, that's my cake.
Great. Thank you, Lynn. Catherine, you're showing yours on screen. Thank you so much. Is it also, Glenda, because of your background, it kind of fades in and out?
Sorry.
No, it's okay. But I love how you did colors and all that.
Yes, I'm at my desk and I have all my material and the things I use when I have in class, so it was easy to reach.
No worries. Awesome. But pretty much what Lynn was saying as well in terms of time dedicated to work and PD. Glenda, for you as well?
Oh yeah, yes, for me, yes. PD and work have like taken over the cake. And then I am happy that gradually I have like taken back my me time, because at the beginning there were no boundaries between work and then family life or others. It was like I got like into so many things that I didn't see further. But now it's like again it's gaining back a portion in my cake. Caring, yes, I have elderly parents, so I do part of my day is also looking after them and taking my mom to hospital because she has to go on some days. So I'm in charge of that. And chores, yes, I don't mind. I'm right now here because I don't do the cooking, not every day. My excuse is my PD. Yes, and they are happy with that. So, and it's something I like. So I just do the basic things. So it's a bit of chores. I like gardening, so that's also that relaxes. I mean, so relaxing, and I do that. So that's part of my me time as well. Gardening, plants. That's my break time.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Glenda. Well, I have bad news for you, and that is that depending on what you assigned your cake to, you need to give away the piece. So then the piece that you assigned, and depending on how big it was, the one that you assigned to chores and housework, you need to give it away to your family members or whoever shares the household with you. The one that you chose for caring for others, you need to give away to the person that you care for. The one that you assigned to work and professional training, you need to give half of that piece to your boss and your colleagues, and you can have half of that piece for you because it's professional development, right? And only the me piece you can keep entirely for yourself. So now the reflection at the end of all this is, how much cake are you going to eat out of the entire one that was available for grabs, right? This is just a little bit of reflection on how much we give to others and how much we keep for ourselves. And giving is great, and giving brings gratitude, and gratitude turns into happiness. And Glenda has a good piece over there. She's going to share it with us. But also, if we want to keep on giving, we need to have somewhere from where to keep on giving. So then we cannot keep on giving from an empty pot. we need our bucket to be somewhat full in order to be able to keep on giving to others, right? So it's important to understand what we do and how we do it, and how much of that stays with us to be able to refill our pot um, daily. It could be ideally, right? So now food for thought. Now they're all craving cake, right? So self-care is, it's personal and subjective. No one can tell you what self-care activities are good for you. You're the only one that can decide that. There's a list and there's options and there's variety, but no one can tell you, Glenda, this one is for you, and Catherine, this one is for you, and Anastasia, you need to do this. It doesn't work that way. You need to figure it out, right? It is ongoing. It is not once a week type of thing. It needs to be somehow incorporated in your daily life. It doesn't have to be a big event. It doesn't have to be a big activity. It could be just 5 minutes to dedicate to something that fills you, right? But it needs to be constant. And then it is self-care, and these kind of activities or actions are not fixed. They're going to change over time. They're going to change because they're context embedded, they're time bound as well. So then what could have been a good self-care activity today might not work for you, or might not be good for you tomorrow. So being flexible even with yourself and what is good for you um, needs to become rooted into understanding this self-care and well-being thing that now with the COVID kind of surfaced once again in all the conversations that we're having and all that, right? And then most importantly, and this just throws the ball back to you, it is your responsibility. No one is going to do it for you. No one is going to set up in your schedule time for self-care if you don't do it, and if you don't demand it, and if you don't um, demand the right for self-care, you're not going to get it. So then in charge of self-care is you, and you only. There might be external factors that somehow facilitate certain things for you. For example, the school board set up, I don't know, I'm making things up, but a team of professional therapists that are available to the school faculty if needed or whatnot. It's your responsibility to reach out. So the resources are there, let's say, but if you don't pick up the phone and call that therapist, nothing is going to happen. It doesn't matter how many therapists are there available for you, right? So it's it's a big thing that you need to take care of yourself. It's not news, is not something that came up now with the COVID. It's always been, but it's more important now, right? So then, talking about self-care and all that, what is well-being then? And I know that there are some examples given, and there are some definitions by Tammy, and also Catherine touched on it when talking about dignified periods and menstruation health and all that. So that is part of the well-being. But put in plain terms, well-being is basically just balancing your human dimensions related needs. So well-being, just as self-care, does not necessarily look the same for everyone, and you are the only one who can define or determine your well-being composition, so to speak, right? So what you could define as well-being for you based on your needs may not be the same thing as for one of your students, for example, based on their needs. Okay. Um, is this idea of well-being clear enough? Like, are there any thoughts on it? Because I know we talked about well-being pretty much the entire day. Okay, Valerie, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for being here. George, so well-being is very personal. Okay. How would you define well-being? What is well-being for you in plain terms? And I promise this is the last open question for you guys. I'm not going to put you on the spot anymore after this. So what's well-being? Getting rest and being able to be productive, balance, okay? Is balance kind of like the common term here? So we're talking about subjective well-being, and I like your definition of balancing our human needs. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Lynn. Okay, well, yeah, again, I would say main characteristic here is also flexibility, because well-being will also depend on your needs. So then as your needs shift, your concept of well-being or your composition of well-being also needs to shift, right? Now, we've been talking about being flexible and all that, and we need to acknowledge and say it out loud. The context has changed, right? And this new context has impacted the teaching settings, the student needs, also teacher needs, also priorities. And have you stopped to think about all these changes, or were you just rushed into changing, right? Have you stopped to understand the impact of all these external variables for which you do not have control, and how that impacts on what you need to do in the classroom or at a personal level, right? Let me just ask you, and this might be a delicate question, but how many of you work with migrant or refugees children in your classrooms? How has that impacted their reality? How many of you work with poor households through the children that you interact with? How many of you work in public systems where the majority of your students come from middle class or low income households, right? How has the context, the COVID context, impacted directly onto those households, therefore onto your students, right? And the next couple of slides, this is my humanitarian side of Anna. These are basically just numbers that help us ground ourselves in terms of what are the external variables we do not have control over that directly impact us in the classroom, right? We have economic contractions, and this is from the World Group Bank. We have reduction in working hours. Again, this is in terms of percentage of the population of that region that experience loss of working hours. So when you have that in a household for a student that needs to sit in front of a screen to do their online education, how does the fact that mom and dad lost their jobs in home would impact on that student performance? Would that student have 3 meals guaranteed a day? Would that student be able to focus on the English class you're providing instead of the rumbling of their stomachs? How would the external context influence what you do and how you can connect and how you can achieve your goals with your education, right? Then we have this from UNICEF in terms of access to education and in terms of the resource necessary to be able to access remote education nowadays, and how that may not happen for 31% of students worldwide, right? All of this affects what and how we adjust. We adjusted our teaching methods, we adjusted our skills, we adjusted at a personal level to be able to cope with this, hopefully, our exercise routine and our diet. Have we adjusted our expectations? Or Beatrix used the word resolutions. Have we adjusted that, both personally and professionally? So, did you? And now this is just really briefly because I'm running out of time, but an anecdote. I was laid off during pandemic in September. I, unfortunately, due to budget cuts, well, I was laid off, right? Now there's 2 more dates that I add to my memory repertoire because I remember all my birthday, the birthday for my loved ones, anniversary dates and all and whatnot. And now I remember September 7th as being the day I was announced to be laid off. And then September 11th being my last day of work on that post. I was a director at an academic program for 7 years. I was a programs manager for almost a year, and now I'm an assistant for an amazing organization. But I had to deal with the fact that due to the context, my expectations for this year in terms of professional development and professional growth needed to shift, because this is not the time to say, sorry, I'm not going to take this job because it's just below my preparation level. No, I need to do it because of other reasons. And it could be an in-between, and I need to take the most advantage of it that I can, but I needed to adjust my expectations, right? So then we talked about professional development and we talked about goals and all that. How much is too much, and when does it become overwhelming to keep expecting to lose weight, to exercise, to cook a balanced meal, to be able to attend all the seminars and all the PD sessions, to be able to do homeschooling while working from home, while staying safe. And in your case, as teachers, motivate your students who might be facing certain other things at home that you have no control over, and so on. How much of it is too much? And when do you need to say, I need to readjust what I'm expecting from myself, either professionally or personally? And this needs to be done intentionally. So, number one, it's okay not to be okay. This is not a time for us to flaunt how well we're doing, because we're not doing well. And we need to say it out loud, and you need to accept it. We need to embrace it. Better times are coming for sure, but this is not the best time of our lives for any of us. Expectations are context embedded, so they depend on the current variables. So if the context changes, our expectations need to change. What is at risk if we do not change our expectation, adjust them, shift them, or update them? We're setting ourselves up for failure, for frustration, for a dent in our self-esteem, and so on. None of this is good stuff for us. All of it is just yucky in terms of how it impacts us personally, therefore projected into our professional lives, right? The locus of control right now is external. That means you cannot control most of the things that are happening. So if you cannot control it, you need to accept that what is happening, and you need to intentionally make the decision of shifting what your expectations are. Because if you just treat it as it is what it is, and these are my expectations, and the results that will show up, well, whatever, and you don't intentionally change them, then guilt is going to creep in on you and say, this was my expectations at the beginning of the year, and darn it, I couldn't make it. Well, it was COVID time. So you intentionally need to focus on what was set up and shift it and change it and accept that as your new expectation. And again, this goes for both professionally and personally, Because if, as human beings, going back to the first slide, we do not cover our needs based on our 5 dimensions, there is no way we can label ourselves as good teachers, as good moms, as good dads, as good whatever other label we want to put on ourselves, more than just being human beings, right? And with that, my alarm clock went off, so my time is up, if I'm not mistaken. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for not falling asleep during this last intervention. If any one of you is interested in my slides, and especially because I have some pretty interesting statistics in there, I can share my updated version with you, George, because the one that I sent doesn't have all the detail.
Perfect.
And
Sure.
More than free to circle around. So thank you so much. Keep safe and just take care of yourself.
Thank you so much, Anna. Is there any question that anybody has for Anna? If so, I mean, it's the end of the event, so we do have a couple of minutes if somebody wants to ask a question. Right. Okay. So lots of thank yous, Anna. I think it has been a very beneficial experience for all of us today. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Beatrice. Thank you, everybody that presented. And I think we're going to call it a day. It's 10:20 where I am, almost p.m. So I think, Catherine, we have the same time in Tanzania. And I think it's about afternoon in the US. All right. So thanks everyone for coming. On behalf of the Affiliate Network Professional Council, James and I would like to thank you. And I think Anastasia will also say a couple words on behalf of the Social Responsibility Intersection of TESOL International.
Thank you all so much for coming. This was a really great way to do a joint event. I think that being in SRIS, it's we already engage in a lot of things outside of TESOL. So everybody is quite overworked, overwhelmed, and engaged in a lot of things outside. But I'm very happy this is recorded. We can always go back to it, reflect upon it, because I know that even as we're sitting here and we're trying to take things in, we shut off our computers. Some of us go back to our kids. Some of us are going to sleep. Some of us are continuing our day. So this was just a really great resource and a great time to pause as we are wrapping up semesters and as some of us are preparing for Thanksgiving here in the States. So that's all. So thank you, George, thank you, James, everyone.
Thank you so much. Jim, would you like to say a couple of words so that we wrap up the event?
Just thank you to everyone for coming out. It's great to see so many people here. It's been a wonderful slate of presentations, and I feel like I've learned so much on this topic. I can't say that I had much balance, before this, but I'm going to definitely make it more of an issue going forward. So thank you to everybody for coming out, and we look forward to seeing you at our next event.
Great, thank you very much. As Anastasia said, all the sessions are being recorded. So they're going to be uploaded on the TESOL International website, on the YouTube channel, on a separate list. And those will be available for everybody to watch, right? So thank you very much. And we'll be seeing you in an event around the world at some point soon. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining. Thanks, everyone. Thank you. Have a good night.
Night.